The background of tarot is, first of all, that it is a 500-year-old system. And tarot actually began as a court game, and it was called Taracci or Trifoni. And Trifoni actually means to triumph. And so it was a game kind of like a trump card game. And so that's how you have the major arcana and the minor arcana. So there are 22 major arcana and 56 minor arcana. And so it was a game that was played. So if you pulled, for example, the magician would trump a minor card. And so it was a court game. It was like a deck of playing cards. It had no spiritual symbolism at all. And it was, when you think about the time, you can see like on the front of this is the Empress, but it was a time when there were emperors and the Pope was in the greatest power, and you have queens and kings and pages and knights, and it's this rich symbolism. But that was of the time. That was 500 years ago. Okay, jump forward to about 1789 when Jean Atelier actually began to look at tarot as a system of understanding your consciousness. And he was the first one. And so he actually started this as the Fool's Journey, to understand that the journey through the major arcana is actually a journey of our psyche from birth through death and beyond. And so that is way more spiritual than a card game that was played in court. So then it kind of started getting a little merged over time, and people started coming up with their own interpretations of what tarot meant. So think like 1800s to around 1920, people really started taking freedom and liberty in discussing, what does tarot look like for me? And so then you have, some people that decided to go a little darker and make it a little bit more mysterious. And so tarot gained a bit of a reputation at that time. It wasn't until 1920 when Pamela Coleman Smith created the Rider-Waite deck. And that is probably the most well-known, that everyone has seen it. And I would actually say to any beginner, it's a very, very good place to start. This is a long story, so I will try to keep it short. But my grandmother, these are actually her teacups, used to read tea leaves. And so when I was a little girl, she would tell me all about intuitive practices and how to connect to your intuition and your deep inner knowing. And ever since I was a little kid, I had a deep interest in it, but I actually had a very corporate career. And so I went to school. I actually went to UWM for marketing. So that was my background. And then I actually went to Marquette for a master's degree in business. And so I have been owning and operating my own business since 2019, but I actually had a brand strategy business well before I did any of this work. This was something I did on the side. It was something I did because I genuinely enjoyed it. I grew up with a knowledge of it, of an ability to tap into our unknown. But it wasn't until later in life that I really started paying attention to this and saying, this is something that we all have as an ability deep within us. We just have to learn to cultivate it. And so it actually wasn't tarot. It wasn't any sort of specific practice, even like tea leaves, that got me into it. It was meditation. And so I started meditating actually it's a long story, but I got stuck during COVID in Peru. So we were stuck in Lima for several months, and no one knew when we were going to come back home because they had shut down the borders. And so I was meditating as a way to calm my nervous system, and it was a way to get back into my mindset. And a friend of mine had a dream while I was still in Peru that I needed a box of tarot cards. And so she sent me a box. And on the day that we returned, and no one knew when we were coming home, there was a box of tarot cards sitting on my front doorstep. And she said, Christina, I had this dream that you would need these as a tool, and you have a powerful purpose. And I hadn't spoken to her in months, and I picked them up and I was like, oh my gosh. I was also raised Catholic, so I came from a very, traditional background, even though my grandmother was interested in the non-traditional. But essentially, I was raised believing that tarot and any sort of divination methods are wrong, and that you're not supposed to use this. But I believe now, my belief has changed, and I actually took an energy healing course several years ago that taught me about beliefs. And it's this incredible healer. His name is Jeffrey Allen. But he basically teaches that beliefs are like pictures, and that you can hang your beliefs like pictures up on a wall, but you can also take them down. And so I did this exercise of understanding, what are my beliefs, not only about myself, but about God? What are my beliefs about my own spirituality? What have I been raised with? What do I want to keep from that? Because much of it actually has been the firm foundation that's led me to being a spiritual healer. But also, how do I reframe some of those beliefs to make them my own? And so I realized that the core belief that what I was raised with was, I believe in God, and I still believe in God, but I do not believe anymore that the authority exists outside of me, within anyone. I believe that the authority exists within me, and that my own spiritual authority is present. And so tarot is a powerful practice. So is tea leaves, so is energy healing. They're all astrology as well, all powerful tools to reconnect you with your own incredible gifts. So I believe that tarot can be used for a variety of different purposes. I don't believe that tarot is fortune telling. I believe that it is a psychological tool. Carl Jung himself used tarot. There's a way of viewing it as it's essentially a tool to understand one's inner journey. So for example, tarot starts with the Fool, and it is the Fool's journey. So through the major arcana, you're looking at the Fool as the 0 point, as our point of consciousness, and how to understand how we build, how we understand that we are the creator of our own reality, how to step into our intuition, that's the second card, how to become the creators of our reality, the Emperor, how to understand abundance and gifts, the Empress. And as you go through the different layers of tarot, you understand all of these are reflections of us. And so I don't necessarily use it as fortune telling. I read it as energy. And so when I sit with people, especially when they've never had a tarot reading before, I tell them, we set an intention. We set a powerful intention together to receive the information that is only to your highest good. And that this is energy that's meant to help you on your particular path. I think the number one thing to put aside is the stigma. And it's hard. I mean, I grew up, I don't know if you've ever heard of Miss Cleo, but like I grew up in this world of like TV psychics and mystics and like 1-800 hotlines and all of this. And it has kind of a seedy reputation. I think an understanding of put all of that aside and look at tarot as a tool to understand yourself and pull the cards for yourself. And so, for example, if you pull a card and you say, for example, let's see, the Magician's right on top. So I pull this card and what am I thinking? This card is an initiation. It is saying you are a powerful creator of your own reality. And so it's looking at this card and maybe putting this card up and saying, what can I learn from this today? What energy is this showing me in my own world today? What have I created today? What powerful tools are at my disposal today? And use it as a way to do a little self-evaluation. It's more of a therapeutic tool than anything. I will say this, I have about 5 or 6 licensed therapists that come to me as clients. And they come because I can offer them a sense of higher reflection that is more than just psychological therapy. We're connecting with your guidance and your deep intuition. Honestly, Robin, for a lot of women, I read for many women, and it's to connect with their own power. And so most of the time when women leave here, they're like, I feel encouraged, I feel hopeful, I feel powerful again. And I'm like, that is what we need more of in this world. So that's what I'm here to do.
It's funny, I went online and I said, where is the best place to live in the United States? And Colorado Springs came up for me. And it's because there's 360 some days of sun there. And I'm like, that is what I need. So within 3 months, I rented out my house. I packed it up. I rented an apartment and I moved my 2 dogs and 3 cats, my teenage daughter and her boyfriend, all to Colorado Springs to start my new journey. And then after I got to a certain point, I felt a calling to come back to Wisconsin and I saw myself doing classes. And so when I moved back, I had owned a house here I had rented before I left. So I moved back into my house, and ironically, there was a metaphysical shop right in the corner in Appleton, Richmond and Bell called Aurora's Apothecary. And I went in there and they did classes in there. They did all kinds of different things. And I asked them, could I do a class? And she said, sure. And so I started kind of developing that class. And as I did that, things unfolded. I came into this with not really looking for it. I never, some people seek out tarot to learn it and things. I never did that. It hit me kind of like in the face one day. And I was like, what is going on? And most of my journey has been exploring myself so much over the past 5 years that I haven't even thought about trying to research Wisconsin. Yeah, so I mean, I consider myself kind of a new age tarot card reader. As I said, I didn't start reading tarot until 2020. So I'm fairly new compared to some that have been doing it for 20 to 30 years. But what I can tell you, when I first started, I found spirit fairs and I was doing readings at metaphysical shops. So there's a lot of collaboration when it comes to marketing, because marketing yourself in this industry is the most challenging. So there's a lot of different people trying to create their own spirit fairs, and then they're collaborating with others to try to get them to buy booths. So that's what I noticed, and there's more and more and more of those happening than when I first started, I think. But as far as collaborating with other readers, like readers collaborating with other readers, unless you meet people at fairs and you're going to fairs a lot, most of us are very much like in our own little world and kind of hermits. So I have been to different areas. I do the Body, Mind, and Spirit Fair, which is one of the largest metaphysical spirit fairs. They go worldwide. So I have ventured out of this area and done, like, I did Raleigh, North Carolina. I did some spirit fairs in Florida. And so of course, Milwaukee, I've done some in Appleton and Green Bay. And so, yeah, so even in Colorado, when I look at Colorado, um, it's very much kind of that woo woo, what a lot of people consider tarot. And you go in and there's like the music and the, gypsy kind of, that type of mystical stuff. And then you come to, like, say, Wisconsin, and you don't see as much of that because Wisconsin people don't buy that because it's very conservative here, and there's a lot of stigma around that. So you get more people like me here that are more of the realistic kind of, you see that I'm like yellows and bright colors and light. And not there isn't, because paganism, if you go into the pagan community, you're going to get more of the kind of that mystical, that type of era. But a lot of us in Wisconsin or conservative states are going to be more like, let me help you figure out your life path. Not everything is set in stone, which I think is a better way to go into tarot card reading, instead of making people feel like they don't have any ability to change their future. Yeah, it was interesting when I was reading up on that, because it made a lot more sense why Wisconsin is more of a difficult state to kind of penetrate with the tarot card business. There is a lot of people that look at it as, you're not supposed to know that, it's evil, it's wrong. And, I look at it as, you hear of the witches, right? The witches of Salem. And I think that it holds true with Wisconsin, kind of had that same feeling. It's very religious, very conservative by nature. And so if, and let's get into this too far, but anything that is unknown and mystical, that is not within the church and it's spiritual, automatically in the past years ago was evil, because it was unexplainable. And if you want to go a little further into that, if you believe the story of Jesus, the witches and Jesus were both the same outcome. So in a sense, they thought of Jesus as a witch because he was doing things that were unexplainable. He was a healer, right? So I just think that Wisconsin has held to that type of philosophy, and I think it still holds true with a lot of. I mean, I went to a craft show. I don't do craft shows anymore because craft shows they will look at me and turn the other way. They're so scared of it. And a lot of people there are in church. And I've had to educate some of the vendors as I'm walking around and say, no, there's a lot of Christians that actually use tarot now. Some of the newer age, open-minded Christians are doing tarot, like Angel Light here in Milwaukee area. That is a Christian-based metaphysical shop. And they hire tarot card readers. I actually worked there for a while. So, yeah, yeah. Now, I have to say that I've learned a lot about the death card. When I originally started, the death card was the scariest card for me. And so I was taught to never read into death with the death card. It is not death, it is transformation and change. But I'm here to tell you that I've had a couple situations where it did come out with death, but it wasn't because I'm predicting when somebody's going to die. It was more of this person needs to know because of the change and the transformation that is going to happen in their life so that they can be prepared for that. So, for instance, my friend called me and said, I want a reading. She does this to me a lot. She's in Colorado. And she said, I said, I got the death card. And all of a sudden, I felt a need to ask her, how is your son? He had just newly went in the military. He was early 20s, and I felt very worried for him. And I didn't know why. And I felt there was some sort of drinking problem going on. And I didn't want to say it, but I was feeling something that was scaring me. And you never talk about death, right? So I did not bring it up. A week later, he actually was in a car accident and died. And I got the death card for her. And she said, Maggie, why didn't you tell me? And I said, because I don't read into the death card like that. And that's, to me, unethical. Because what if I tell you that and it doesn't happen? That's a horrible thing to put into somebody's head. And I don't want to manifest something like that either. I had another lady who came to me with her husband had stage 4 cancer. And she says, I'm not here to ask if he's going to die. I know he's going to die. And then literally I was shuffling and a car popped right up into the air and fell down. It was a death card. So sometimes it does come out that way, but it's not to predict somebody's death date, right? I don't think we're supposed to know that. So I started reading for Aurora's first in Appleton, and then they asked me to go to their Green Bay shop because they were right downtown during the farmers market. And so on Wednesday nights, I would go down there from like 4 to 7, and they put me up in the window as people were walking by. Actually, if you look on my Google, one of the pictures is of me by the window in my first day there, right? So that was my first day reading publicly. And a lady came up to me and she was beside herself about her son. She was so worried about her son. And if you go on Google, she actually posted a review about this. So you can actually go up and read about it. Her son was was going through a bad divorce, and he was being blamed for abuse on his daughter. And that triggered me. Because logically, and here's the part of being a reader, you have got to divide that. Your logic, your opinions, you have got to set it aside and allow just the messages from spirit to come in so your opinions don't get in the way. So first I'm like, okay, spirit, just give me the answers that I need to know and please set aside all my opinions. And he's not guilty. He is not guilty. And it was coming out clear as day in the cards that he was not guilty. He was being set up by his ex-wife, and his ex-wife was turning his children against him, and that this was going to go to court, and there was going to be within the court system, they were going to want to kind of find him guilty so bad that there was going to be some corruption within the court system, and there was going to be a fallout within the court system, where I felt that people in this court hearing were going to start removing themselves or be removed because things were just going to be really messy. But at the end, he was going to be okay, and eventually his relationships with his kids were going to, at least one of them, the daughter, I said that's going to take a long time. It may take years and years because she was corrupted by her mother so bad. But his son was kind of dragged into this, and I said, he is going to end up moving in with you and the grandmother and her son who's living with her, and they're going to rebuild their relationship, and he's going to need some therapy and things like that. And I'm thinking to myself, how did I come up with all of this? And I'm so new in this. I'm thinking, what if I'm wrong? Like, this is going to be the end of my career, right? So I moved here, and she started doing Zoom readings as this whole, it was a long court process, like years, right? So I think it was like maybe 2 or 3 years that this went on. So she'd randomly get readings, and as we started going, it's like, oh my gosh, Maggie, she said, I think you're right. There's something with the court system now. The judge is stepping down, and there's going to be a new judge, and there's something with the DA, and what do you think? Is this still going to go down the way you thought? And I says, I'm still getting that they're going to throw this out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what if I'm wrong? This whole 3 years, I'm like, I'm doing these reads. I'm like, what if I'm wrong on this? But I'm listening to my guides. I'm listening to my cards. All of a sudden, one day, I'll never forget it, I almost started crying. She messaged me and she says, Maggie, you are not going to believe this. They threw it out. And since then, his son moved in with them. And he's needed some help because there's, been a lot of repair and healing that's had to happen, but they've been taking care of his, and is rebuilding with his son. The daughter is still kind of MIA. And so everything worked out in the same way that I said. And I was like, wow, I'll never forget this. And how you can't make this stuff up. And what it did is it built my trust in myself is what I do.